welcome back to Both Sides of the Brain. I'm your host, and I got my first guest here today, Kristi, also known as Krazed Kitty on X/Twitter, whichever you prefer to call it. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Nice, nice. And how did your day go today?
Uh, it was good. It was a bit crazy, but it was a good day. How about you?
It was pretty good. I didn't do much, but just make sure everything was up and ready for our exciting episode today. Um,
Awesome.
you're the very first guest, so how does that make you feel?
No pressure, no pressure, right? Definitely flattered and honored. Thank you. I
Uh,
appreciate
you're
you.
you're welcome. The nerves they're settling in, aren't they?
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah, imagine doing this shit solo. um, so I know you wanted to talk a little bit today about um, mental health and certain things you deal with regarding it.
Yeah,
Care to elaborate on what that is?
sure. I just wanted to share a little bit about my journey with mental health. And like I have been diagnosed with post PTSD.
Hmm.
Sorry.
Post traumatic
And
stress. I know it's a mouthful.
yes, oh my goodness, yes. And then some severe anxiety. And so I've done quite a few different things over the years. And what I specifically wanted to share about today was EMDR therapy and just like how it's helped me on my journey.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. So, going along with that, like, could you explain a little bit on what that is to people who don't know? Because I myself aren't really knowledgeable on that, so I'm definitely curious.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Before I actually started working with it, with my therapist, I didn't really know what it was either. Um, so EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it's a lot of big words. Uh, EMDR is much easier to say. But it's relatively new. Like it only goes back to 1989, and it was actually discovered on accident by this lady. She's a PhD. Her name is Francine Shapiro. So I thought that was kind of cool that they just like happened upon it. But it's had trials and stuff since then, and it's been shown to be like really effective form of therapy that can range from like age range from kids to like all the way to adults. And it can help with all kinds of different like disorders like anxiety, depression, dissociative disorders, eating disorders, gender dysmorphia, obsessive compulsive disorder, and personality disorders. So
Oh
kind of,
shit, that's a lot.
yeah, it kind of has a wide umbrella of stuff that it can cover. So
Well,
it's,
that's pretty cool though.
yeah, I mean, it, I don't know, it really has helped me so much. And it's kind of neat how it works and just learning about it. I actually cited a source from like my.cleveland and clinic.org health, and they talk all about it. And so I went back to get the correct name, and the verbiage, because I'm by no means an expert, so I wanted to make sure,
Nah, nah, that's solid work on that because we gonna need to double check, sometimes triple check our facts from
right.
time to time. I'm guilty of that where I gotta go and look at something like two or three times and I'm like, wait, what the hell? Oh, okay, okay.
So
But
what I found and what they were talking about, when I read more into this, was that What they found was that your brain stores memories pretty smoothly, right? And it creates little networks and creates
Mm-hmm.
connections in those memories to other things, which could be like your sight, sound, smell, touch, those things, right? But in trauma, your brain kind of goes offline and there's a disconnect on how it stores those memories and on the experience. So the things that you feel, see, smell, touch often are stored in a way that doesn't let the brain heal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it kind of damages. It's like an injury to your brain is what trauma is. And it makes it more sensitive to things that you saw or heard or smelled during that traumatic event. And it can make it so that they are extremely like big. Like you'll just instantly have a flashback or a trigger if you smell something that was related to a certain memory, you know?
Like sort of making shit seem like it is what it isn't.
Yes, and making it feel like it's right now. So it has a way of recalling that memory, but then intensifying it and making it feel so big and like it's happening right now. So that's what they found, that when that happens with the trauma, right, in your brain, and it's not healing, that keeps happening. So something keeps triggering it, that keeps happening. They found that it can keep linking to new things. So if you don't try to heal that part, it's going to continue to replay and replay and replay until it gets healed. So that's what this EMDR is supposed to do, is help heal that injury in your brain so that you can stop having that trauma over and over again.
Damn. Interesting as hell. So like, so far since you've been like doing it, how would you say that it's like helped or not helped?
So for me personally, it's helped tremendously. So I have PTSD, and most of that is regarding my abusive childhood. And when I first started going to therapy for that, I was in college. So it's been a good 15 years or so now, probably longer. But I started like working with a therapist on like these memories that I was having that would just put me shaking in the corner, you know, anytime something came up or triggered it. And for me, it could be something as someone's personality type. So my stepfather was an abuser. So anyone who had his personality type, which was strong and like forceful or demanding or whatever, that would trigger me and make me highly sensitized to anything going on in my environment. And several times I ended up like with anxiety or panic attacks. So being able to work through these memories that were triggering these things with EMDR has lessened it so that I can talk about different instances, or like even talk about my stepfather without being a mess on the floor, like, and just spiraling into, you know, panic.
So you sort of had like a rough childhood, both like physically and mentally.
Yes, very much so.
And might as well throw emotionally in there too.
Yeah.
So it's like a triple whammy right there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I grew up in a household that was not very safe. My stepfather was abusive for no reason, and that was from about the age of 5 until I was like 17 when I left his house. Yeah, so it was a long time. And I grew up with 3 siblings, a sister and 2 brothers that were younger than me. and just lots of trauma, lots of abuse. And I have a lot of repressed memories and a lot of like hidden memories, and you can't process those memories with EMDR if you're not talking about them or remembering them, obviously. So that for me is still kind of like an injury in my brain. So there are still triggers that I get to this day that I don't know necessarily what they're connected to, except for I know it's connected to trauma because of how I respond. So even though I've done so much work over the last, 15, 20 years with this, I still have instances where, someone will say something or talking about something, and it turns to anything that reminds me of my stepfather, really, that will trigger something that is like locked away, and I will still have a reaction. So unfortunately, I can't process those yet with that, but hopefully, science is getting better all the time, so hopefully we'll stumble upon something else that can help with that later down the road.
Yeah, and I for one would have to agree with that, because it's like, it's tough when you go through something and then you want to forget, but be it as it may, as hard as you try and forget, like you said, like, it'll trigger it, and you can't control it. Because
No.
for me, with my schizophrenia, that's sort of like how I am. Like, when I hear the voices and then I'm hearing thoughts and having these thoughts of like harming myself or harming others, I've got ways that I try and like cope with it and block it out. But every now and again, there's those moments where I'm like on the edge of giving in, and it's not my fault. It's just I just can't control it. So I definitely 100% agree and understand where you're coming from with your whole scenario. But good on you for like surviving it so far and
Thank you.
keeping on pushing on.
Yeah, I mean, just the EMDR work in itself, like, helped so much with the abuse memories that I did have, and just processing my feelings with those, because I was a child when that was happening. So as an adult, trying to work through those feelings is very hard, because the memory that I'm having is going to be like sounds, it's feelings in my body. It's not necessarily, words or anything complicated, because I was a child when these things were happening. So the triggers are different than what it would be, when you're older.
Right.
And like for me, smells play into it as well. I have heightened sensitivity with smells, and hearing, for sure. My hearing is heightened, and so all those kind of play into it. But like the EMDR, like, it works with your senses, so it kind of helps tap into that. It's eye movement, so most of the time it's a light or following the therapist's finger back and forth while you're talking about the traumatic event. For me personally, we used vibrations. So we used like a little vibrating pad in both of my hands as I was talking, and the vibration would go from one side to the next, just back and forth, just really easy. You can also use like tapping while you're doing that. So tapping once, twice on your thighs, just back and forth, just like tapping. And the thought process behind that is, when you're doing that, you're accessing both sides of your brain. So you're accessing...
No pun intended.
Right? You're accessing those both sides that store the memory, and then the senses that are stored kind of like with that memory at the same time. And it's supposed to help just desensitize how traumatic it feels. And the more that you talk about it, the feelings and the trauma that's so intense like starts to go down. So depending on how traumatic the memory is, like you could have 2 or 3 sessions just on one memory, so for me it took 2 or 3 years just to process some traumatic memories that I had from when I was younger.
Yeah. And that had to have been like pretty rough on your mental
Yes.
for sure. But back to something you mentioned earlier about
Mm-hmm.
the vibrations. I didn't want to cut you off, but I gotta imagine like when you were doing that with the vibrations and going switching hands and shit. It must have had like a weird feeling, like, because we all know how vibrations feel, but I due to that treatment, like, what did it make your body feel like?
I honestly was very apprehensive when we first started doing it, and maybe a little bit of a jerk to my therapist, because I was like, really, this is what we're doing? I'm gonna hold these little like vibration things in my hand for real? So I might have been very skeptical when we first started.
Damn.
But I was, after we worked through, like, we started with an easier memory, and after we kind of worked through that one and de-escalated the memory and how it was affecting me, then I kind of believed it a little bit more and kind of just went with the flow. And I was like, okay, I'll hold on to these if this is working,
Oh yeah. I'd probably be in that same boat if I ever had treatment like that. That would
Right.
Exactly be my thought process.
Right. You're like, you want me to do what now? Right. And she did ask me at first if I wanted to listen, like, do tones. And she's like, it's basically like a speaker on either side of you, and it buzzes one at a time, like each side. And I was like, no, I don't. Nope. I don't want to do tones. No.
You were like super skeptical to the idea.
Yeah, I was like, no, tones would drive me crazy. I don't like noises. And then the tapping, like, touch was not safe. So I was like, nope, I don't want to do that either. So I was like, okay, guess I'm doing the little vibrating pads. That's fine. We'll try those.
So wait, when you were asked about the tones, was it like something that had to do with placing something in your ear to listen, or it was just like a loud thing that came from like a speaker?
A loud because thing from a speaker.
Okay, this is my first time hearing about like shit like that. Like, I know about like certain treatments and stuff, but all this you're explaining is new as hell. Like, it's very foreign to me. Maybe that's sheer ignorance on my part, but yeah.
No, I mean, I didn't know anything about the treatment before I started it either.
Something's coming off. Yeah, that's oof. That's a lot. That is a lot.
Yeah, I worked through a lot of big memories, stuff that was pretty traumatic, and so it took longer, I feel like, because I had a lot of, like, for lack of better words, like little trauma memories, within the same period of time. So it wasn't just like one incident, where it's like, because you can have PTSD from like one single event that happens. And so, yes, child abuse is like,
that's a staple, like, when that happened. And I don't mean to say it like that, but like, I don't know, it's just like everywhere you go, somebody putting their hands on a child or some shit like that, and it fucks with their mental, like, severely.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it wasn't like one single event for me. Like, it was a span of a lot of freaking years. So it made it more intertwined with the EMDR. Like, I was processing memories that were interlaced and overlapping, you know? So it take a little bit longer to process ones that are all kind of connected instead of having just like one main event or something that you're processing at one time, you know?
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you mentioned something else to me. I remember. Damn it, it was just on the tip of my tongue. Um, Shit. Sorry.
That's okay.
Um, you know what? I'll probably remember it. Moving on.
Okay.
So, now, these treatments, like, I know you've been doing them for a while, but like, um, I don't know if I've asked this already, but what is the earliest memory you have of you like starting it?
Oh, okay. So, do you mean like when I started the process, or like the memory, like the age of the first memory or something?
The age of the
The
first memory.
Okay. So I was 5 is the first memory that I remember.
Shit.
Yeah.
That's super early.
Yes. Because it was so like traumatic. Like, I can picture it in my head, like a picture. And I didn't used to be able to talk about it without like becoming very like upset and
Right.
almost like panicky. So that was one of the first. Well, we did an easy one to roll into it, which was good. But that was one of the first ones that we talked about and worked on. And if it's okay, I'll elaborate a little bit more. I don't want to like.
Yeah, no, go right ahead.
Okay, give people warning that we are going to talk about child abuse for a hot minute, you know. But
trigger warning for anyone that'll listen. But this podcast is raw. It is real.
So we I remember like a picture. So even now, like, even though I've processed the memory and I've desensitized from it, right? I'm not panicking from it anymore. I can still picture it in my head.
Right.
And so I was in the back of my stepdad's car, and it was a blue car, and I remember the leather being like this gross, like off tan color. And it had one of those like boat seats in the front, you know, like the long one that's all connected. And my sister was sitting in the front. She was 3 at the time. And I was in the back seat, and my stepfather got really angry about something. And I tended to be his whipping boy. So he grabbed a screwdriver and hit me in the eyebrow with it. Yeah. And I ended up in the hospital with, I think it was like 10 stitches in my eyebrow. And he just told everybody that my little sister hit me with a screwdriver.
Just covered the whole ordeal up.
Yeah. Yes. The force behind it, I would have thought would have, you know,
give you some sort of permanent damage.
Well, I'm lucky that it missed my eye for sure. But I was thinking that, you know, like now that I'm older, like how do you not know that was like adult damage and not like child damage, you know?
Right.
Like, how do you know that a 3-year-old like didn't do that? Like that doesn't seem right in my head, but you know, times are different.
Sure there are probably people that had their like suspicions and whatnot.
Yeah, times were just different. People didn't talk up, you know.
And then there was like no proof. It's just he said, she said.
Yeah, that was you know, mid 80s. Not to tell you how old I am, but mid 80s.
Yeah, it's all good.
So, but I'm able to talk about that now without like having that overwhelming panic anymore. So where it started at like an escalated like 10, on a 1 to 10 scale.
Right.
Now I can talk about it, and it's probably like at a 1 or 2. So I can still have some triggering feelings around them, but it's not anywhere as intense as it used to be. So it's worked really well for me.
Well, I'm glad that that's like really gotten to the point where you can handle it and you can live your life without worry. I mean, I don't want to say without worry, because there's always that off chance that breakdowns or whatever. But from how you're progressing now, it's pretty cool.
Well, thank you. Well, and part of that as well, they're working on the emotional aspect of it as well. We're reprocessing the thoughts and the feelings that we were having. So a lot of those were negative and like they were my fault or whatever, and we replaced those feelings and thoughts with positive things that, I was a child, that those things were not my fault, that, I'm not to blame for those things, so the positive reinforcement. So anytime when they were talking about the feelings and pulling that stuff out, part of the process in EMDR is to put in some positive things as well, to help with the transition, because the hardest part is leaving that office because you just opened up this can of worms, right? You're talking about your feelings and your memories and all this stuff, and you have to make it to the next session.
Repressed.
Right. You have to make it to the next session without having to freak out about it when you're still working on it. So that's kind of like, that was the hardest part for me, was that in between time when we're not working on it, to be able to store it away until we could work on it. And so my trick that I worked with the therapist with was, I had a jar. So I just envisioned like a glass mason jar that screw tops, right? And so after our session, we would do a check-in. And so after we're recalling this memory, sitting there with the vibrations, and we're talking, and I'm telling her how I'm feeling and where I feel that in my body. And then we're processing the thoughts and the feelings that I have. Then I open my eyes, we turn off the vibrations, and she asked me, okay, how are you feeling? Where are you feeling it in your body? Is there any tension? Is there any, do you notice anything? So it's kind of like a body scan, right? And then she's like, okay, how are you feeling? Right? Because we don't want to carry these things with us because they can be very heavy. So we would check in, see how I'm feeling. And if there was something that I was feeling or that was too heavy, we talked about opening up the mason jar. And I'm a visual person, so like I can visualize that in my head, where we're opening up that jar, whatever I'm feeling, we're putting it in there and sealing it tightly until our next session. And that was a coping mechanism for me through the week while I was gone, not in therapy. And if something would trigger me, I would just like stop and try to think of physically like putting it in that jar. So that helped for me to kind of like stow those things away until I was in a space that was safe, that I could talk about them.
Well, then I'm glad that like really worked out.
Yeah, it was very helpful.
My times in therapy, like they get like that too. So, and when I started like showing like symptoms and stuff for schizophrenia, I was 9, but I didn't get diagnosed until I was 15 because I didn't really say anything back then because I didn't know what was going on. I just,
Right,
as
you
a
were a kid.
child,
You didn't know.
yeah, I was just going with the flow, thinking the shit was just like normal. So I
Mhm.
just said, fuck it, I'll just deal with whatever this is. But then it got to a point where it was coming, it started to become a hassle, and I couldn't like focus in school and stuff like that. And I was
Mhm.
just like, all right, I need to speak up and say something about this. So
Good for
when I
you.
finally told my mother about it, we went from there.
Yeah.
And another thing with my schizophrenia is that I didn't really tell people about it until I hit like um my 20s.
Yeah.
So like only like um my mom and my grandmother knew for a good chunk of my life, which is crazy to say.
Mhm. Yeah. I didn't
But
start working on any of my stuff until my 20s either.
see, it's like it's contagious or whatever.
I think that's when we finally realized like shit's fucked up, right? And like that's not normal, and that not everyone went through the same shit. Like I was like, oh, like I had a roommate in college that her parents were like really happy for her when things went well, and like they were really nice, and they would always come over and like bring stuff to the dorms. And I went to her house one time, and I was like, this is not, how is this real? Like they were very loving and kind, and I was just like, I'm thinking maybe what I experienced isn't right. So
Most definitely.
yeah, it
Like
was hard. It was hard to
something
come to that
clicked.
realization, you know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Something definitely clicked right there. It was like, all right, this is not good. Better
Right. Well, and
deal with this now.
I knew it was affecting everything, right? Like I knew it was affecting my attitude, how I did stuff, how I talked, how I treated people. Like I was not a very friendly, nice person. So I was not the same happy-go-lucky kind of, positivity person that I am today. Because I was just holding on to too much trauma and so much shit. Like it wears you down, man. It does.
Shortcomings made you better.
Well,
I mean,
I have.
that's how I like to look at it.
That is good. Yeah, I have been. I have surprised many of people in my life who, a lot of people don't know about my past or my trauma. And especially now, like online, when you meet people online, like that's not something that you really like say out loud first, you don't really like get that deep, right? So not everybody knows about that. And when people hear some of the shit that I've gone through or the things that I remember, and they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're such a nice person. Like, why aren't you some like raging bitch or something? And I'm like, dude, I used to be, for real. Really.
Oh, Kristi, thank you for doing this episode.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, guys, so that was my special guest for today. Very cool person. Very interesting information that she gave out. And remember, if you're struggling with what she's going through, always know that you're not alone. Chris, before we like sign off here, is there like any other things you want to say to like the masses to let them know or possibly help them deal with it?
Hey, I would just say, don't give up. You can always find someone to talk to. There's always someone to talk to. Like, reach out for help, and if that's too hard, just talk to somebody that you trust, that's close to you. There is always a person And it might not be who you think it's going to be, you know, but someone you're comfortable with. And talk to somebody and try to get some help. That's the only way to get better.
Yeah, that outlet that'll give you like a sense of comfort.
Yes. Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was really awesome. I enjoyed every second of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. All right, guys, I'm gonna sign off here.
Okay.
Kronos Wolfang. This was my guest, Kristi, a.k.a. Krazed Kitty. She goes by Krazed Kitty on X/Twitter, so give her a follow if you want. And then till the next episode. Bye.
Bye.